You've been writing for a little while now. You've been writing the Tom Clancy novels.
What we try to do is write characters that are, principle-based individuals. We feel like that's part of our job, is to provide role models to the people who read our work. We are not ready to move into a America where we can't all just have a barbecue like we used to.
Right.
I'm not willing to give up on those days.
It's that military mindset of, look, we're both here, we have this mission, we got to get it done. You have strengths, I have weaknesses, we bring them, we balance them, whatever. That's what Clancy did. He made those people and their service and their sacrifice come to life. We continue to have some of the best, most dedicated, committed fighting men and women on the planet Earth. These guys that we met, they casually and calmly refer to themselves as the apex predators on the planet. They have no competition. You will not see them coming. They will kill you and they will go home safely. So we got that going for us, which is nice.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Chad Prather Show. You know the drill. Go to where podcasts are offered. Leave us a 5-star rating. It's what we deserve. And also, leave us a review. Don't really care what you say. I just want the review. You can tell me something negative. You can tell me something positive. You can interpret something I said wrongly. I don't care. Just go leave the review. That's what we want. And but no, seriously, we do appreciate you guys. Thank you for tuning in to the show, whether you're listening by audio or watching by video. I'm now out of focus. This is just how I look. I appreciate you guys so much. We've been having fun out on the road. I kind of took a little bit of time off from doing live shows, but we're getting back in the swing of things. And I'm telling you, the second half of this year is a full schedule. So find me on the road, watchchad.com. That is the most vain website address on the planet. It's almost like OnlyFans, except I am my only fan. Watchchad.com is where you want to go. It's where all the fun stuff is. Find me on the road. Let's get into the conversation. My buddies Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson are with me. Andrews and Wilson, that's the writing team. These guys are legends. Welcome back to the show. How are you guys?
Good, man. Good to see you.
We like being called legends. I think that might be the first time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to call you that just simply because I don't know anybody writing as much stuff as you guys are writing at this point. Y'all are just burping out books at this point. And maybe that's the deal.
That aftertaste?
That's what I smell.
That explains it.
You guys have written a ton of books, and we'll get into that. You also, and y'all write in tandem. You write as a team. And now you've been writing for a little while now. You've been writing the Tom Clancy novels, which you guys, the last time you were on the show, I was fascinated by that. I want to revisit that topic again. This is amazing to me because anytime I talk to Jeff, I try to explain who Jeff Wilson is. Somebody will ask me, something, and I'll say, well, let me tell you, I try to tell them your resume, Jeff. So I'm going to give both of you guys, this is the intro from y'all's website. This blows my mind. This blows my mind. I hate it when people do intros or do a bio from my website because I don't know who wrote that, and it really sounds like crap. But let's first of all, let's go to Brian. All right, Brian Andrews, U.S. Navy vet, Park Leadership Fellow, former submarine officer with a psychology degree from Vanderbilt, master's in business from Cornell University. So far, all that's true, right?
That's true.
All right. Brian's also a principal contributor at Career Authors, which is a site dedicated to advancing the careers of aspiring and published writers. Jeff, you've worked as an actor, firefighter, paramedic, jet pilot, diving instructor, as well as a vascular and trauma surgeon. And at some point in time, you just go, I'm an overachiever.
Well, or I'm a great fiction writer. Maybe I didn't do anything.
I mean, you served in the Navy for 14 years, made multiple deployments as a combat surgeon with the East Coast-based SEAL team, and you guys are down in Florida, got 4 children. So let me ask you a question. With all of those accomplishments, you guys are probably, I'll get controversial right up front, you guys probably saw what the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs had to say the other day about his whole deal. He caught a lot of hell for something. It was completely misinterpreted, in my opinion. Jeff, you got 4 children, all the things you've accomplished. Do you love your accomplishments more than your children?
Absolutely not. My favorite job I've ever had was being a dad. You and I talked about this.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy, right? It's a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
You get yelled at for that.
I said over and over this past week, I wasn't going to get involved in that conversation and then now become the chief vocal person on that deal.
Oh, yeah, I saw it. I saw you, and I think I chimed in, and then I saw everything else.
Well, I've got a friend of mine. She follows me on both X and Instagram, and she sent me a private message through Instagram, and she said, I made one comment under your deal. I can't believe the amount of hate and vitriol I received from it. I was like, well, you'll learn never to comment on one of my posts because it gets crazy. But no, I thought it was so unfounded and unfair what that guy said. I mean, there's a Catholic kid at a Catholic school talking to Catholic kids about their Catholic faith. I'm like, wow, this guy, what he said. Anyway, it was insane. But, I made the comment over and over again. I said, I would trade my career, and I've got 4 kids too. I would trade my career, any part of my career, over and over again. The proudest thing that I've ever been as a dad, And I don't know any woman that doesn't feel the same way. So anyway.
I think that's all he was trying to say.
That's
you know what I mean? Like, it's just so out of context and taken out of it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I know you guys, I bring that up simply not to be controversial. I know you guys also write from a faith-based perspective. Your fiction is action, but it does something a little bit different. It actually has a real grounding to it. It's got a value system attached to it. Is that a fair assessment, or how would you describe it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think what we try to do is write characters that are, principle-based individuals. They're people that when you finish the book, you say, wow, I like the way that he or she solved that problem. When they faced a moral crisis, they had a moral compass that they turned to and helped guide them through whatever difficulty it was that we put them in as the authors in the story. That's important to us because we know that a lot of people don't read, they're not out there reading self-development books or philosophy books. They're reading fiction because they want to be entertained, and we want to entertain people, but at the same time, we want people to have role models in their life, and we feel like that's part of our job is to provide role models to the people who read our work.
Yeah. And that's real world, in my opinion. My buddy Chad Robichaud, he's an 8-time deployed Force Recon Marine, MMA champion. He's 5'0", but he'd kill you. I wouldn't fight him with 10 men. He's got 13,000 people out of Afghanistan. He's been, all over the place, Poland, dealing with Ukrainian stuff. But he's a Christian, a very outspoken believer. God moved radically in his life. And he said, I wrestled with this thing. How can I be a believer and also a warrior? And, he's got an interesting testimony about that. So I think that what you guys write from that foundational principle, I think it's real life. Do you think, because I ask myself this question sometimes in doing political humor, do you think it would have been easier for you guys or more mainstream if you would have left that out? Was that ever a consideration?
I don't think it was never a consideration. I mean, we are who we are. We know Chad. We love Chad for that same reason. So I don't think it was ever something we even thought or considered. You can make an argument that you would bring in some people if you said one thing and other people. The good news is now the country's so perfectly divided down the middle that you're really just choosing between 50 and 50. So we try to focus on our values, our family values, and our faith in all of our books. And in the end, by being relatively apolitical, because, we have our political views, and you and I have talked privately about what they are, and that wouldn't surprise anybody probably, but we don't focus on that in our work because our work is for everybody. And so, you never really bring someone around to your point of view by, making fun of them or whatever. And so, I don't think it was a consideration, but I also don't think it would have been effective. You know what I mean? I don't think it would have helped the cause of getting the word out or selling books. So,
And we're stubborn. We are not ready to move into a America where we can't all just have a barbecue like we used to.
Right.
We honestly believe that most people are happy to, nudge each other, needle each other, poke fun at each other, but still be able to crack open a beer with your neighbor who might have a different, political candidate's yard sign in their front yard. I'm not willing to give up on those days. I think it's a very sad day when we can't all just hang out and have a discussion without having to yell at each other. So
yeah.
We're not willing to give up on that.
I miss the days when we could disagree and still be friends. But and it's, you know this better than we do because you're in that space more than we are. But it's really a few % on either side that consume all the oxygen in those fights. You know, and I follow you closely because we're friends, but also because I like the stuff you say. And your stuff is not it's made to sound inflammatory, but you're just saying what we're talking about. It's like common sense stuff. Like you should be able to say, hey, I think that was stupid. It usually it was. And have people go, well, yeah, no, that was stupid. Why can't we be like that? Why can't we be like we used to be? So Brian's right. We're not giving up on it. Our characters in all of our books are for everybody. Make you be proud to be an American, and maybe we can make everyone calm down. We'll see.
Yeah. I think that's a smart, mature philosophy. You know, I have people all the time who say, Chad, you're such a pot stirrer. And I'm like, I don't see myself as being that. I'm sarcastic. I like to say things that are a little more pointed and that it uses a little more sarcasm and humor. So if you could ever read it in my actual voice, but again, you can't do that on X. You can't do that on a social media platform. I always remind people that social media is not real life. And then I have, because you don't walk into a restaurant and immediately start picking people out by their political platform. You sit down next to them, you say hello, you visit with people, and that's true of strangers. Yeah.
Social media is neither media nor is it social. So I'm not really sure why they call it that.
It's really not. And it's gotten so vitriolic. And, I like to post my travels. We were talking about before we started taping some of our travel nightmares, and I like to post about stuff I run into on airplanes or in the airport or in hotels or restaurants. And I joke about these things. And some people get really upset that they're like, all you're doing is complaining about this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of funny. I walked into a hotel and there was somebody's poop was still in the toilet. They're like, oh my God. I'm like, listen, it's just kind of funny, right? Stuff happens. And literally, I'm pointing out. You should be pointing these things out. Well, get off the internet if you can't
point out when someone doesn't flush. We really should.
I don't think that's controversial. I challenge you to find that 49% of the population who likes finding a steamer in their hotel room. Like, who are those people?
I got on an airplane the other day in Birmingham, Alabama, and this guy was on the phone. And he was sitting in my seat. It was one of those little ones, that's got 2 seats on one side and 1 row of seats on the other side, and they kind of balance it out. There's no first class in that, so I'm in the bulkhead seat. The guy's sitting in my seat, so I'm like, okay, I'll just sit next to him. No big deal. We're going to the same place. Well, he's got his leg over in my seat. He's shaking. He's on the phone. He's doing the whole thing. And finally, I'm like, man, can you move over a little bit? Well, he just immediately lumps over and pretends he's asleep. And so I just moved him over. Well, I made a post about it, and I jokingly said, I'm about to choose violence. And I took a picture of his leg in my seat. And people were so upset. They're like, you don't have any class or character to be calling this guy. I'm like, shut up. This isn't an Andrews and Wilson novel here. We're not going to kill the guy. Not going to make anybody bleed. You guys what's new? So you guys are doing the Tom Clancy thing. I've asked you because this fascinates me. I talked to Nelson DeMille a few times because he's been writing with his son, their newest novels. And I'm like, how is that going? Because Nelson, I think, is 82, 83 years old. His son, of course. I think they kind of differ a little bit politically in how they see the world. And Nelson said, well, we don't discuss books during the holidays or at family dinners because we tend to tie in a little bit. But you guys get along pretty well. How many books now have you guys done together?
I'm not sure.
25?
Oh, it's almost 30. Yeah,
it's a lot.
28, I think, that are done. Yeah.
We have a few that we wrote before we started writing together, but since 2016, we've just been writing together.
Yeah.
And you told me the process. You've told us the process before of how you come out with a chapter, you swap it out. Walk me through that again on how that works.
He tells me what to write and I write it, and he yells at me a lot. And no. So we do what you're saying is true. We write simultaneously, which seems impossible, especially since we don't outline. We won't even get into that, but there's a lot of phone calls and stuff like that. But yeah, we divide, the book into 3 acts like most people. We write in that structure. And in the first act, we'll divide up the books by POV, right? Because we write in multiple points of view. And he's writing one character, I'm writing another. So he's writing chapters 1, 2, 5, 11, whatever, and I'm writing the others. And we just go. And then we got to talk a lot, so we don't well, you can't do that. I killed that guy 3 chapters ago. So we got to avoid that kind of stuff. But every few chapters we swap them, and Brian rewrites all my stuff and makes it better. I rewrite all his stuff and make it better. And then it goes into the file and it's done. The other nice thing about that, not only is it fast, but we're kind of editing as we go. So our rough draft is a little bit further along than when we used to write individually, I would argue. But it only works because there's no ego involved. It's that military mindset of, look, we're both here. We have this mission. We got to get it done. You have strengths. I have weaknesses. We bring them. We balance them. Whatever. But if you put ego aside and just say what makes the best book, then that's doable. I think that's something that's probably hard for some people to be able to do. But for us, it's you didn't drive that submarine by yourself, right?
Right. And I think that's a great point, right? Like in the military, nobody's driving a submarine by themselves. No one in naval special warfare is hitting a compound and taking HVT by themselves. And so it was already woven into our DNA that, we like to collaborate, mission before self, put yourself behind the needs of the ship or the crew or the mission. So we were already approaching difficult problems that way. And I think the only reason that writing seems like something that it's strange to do collaboration on is because typically writers are pretty protective of their prose. I wrote this beautiful sentence. You can't change it because it's perfect. Well, we don't really care about one beautiful sentence in chapter 13 or 37 or whatever. What we care about is at the end of the day, you've experienced this adventure in this story that you picked up of ours, that we transported you to a place in somebody else's shoes to do something that you'd never have an opportunity to do in real life. And that changed your perspective on the world and gave you a nice, wonderful escape from whatever your daily routine is, whatever your life is like. Because that's ultimately our job as storytellers, is we're giving people an adventure in somebody else's shoes.
Here's a way to think of it that everyone can relate to, and I know you can just because I know you well. How many times a week do you thank God that your wife is part of that equation of raising those kids, right?
Yeah.
Like either one of us could raise them, but I don't just do 2 and she does the other 2. Like we all raise them together, and there are times that I'm like, man, I would have jacked that up. Thank goodness you were here,
Yeah.
and vice versa, right? Because we have the same goal to turn out a relatively decent human being that's, not going to have severe pathology. So, we have to partner because that's the mission. And it's a lot like that.
Yeah, the child rearing metaphor is a great one for the book. We want that book to go out in the world
and be the best.
Stand on its own, and be the best it can be, and us just to be proud of it, not proud of particular, like I said, sentence on this page or this chapter.
Yeah, Glenn, and I think I've used this guy with you guys before, this term. Glenn Beck, I heard him say it years ago about Brad Thor. He said he doesn't write fiction, he writes faction. And you guys both have enough experience in life, both military and just life, and you're so ridiculously well rounded in your experiences and your education and just things you've done. I love it because you learn from those books. So I read you guys, and I some of the stuff that I'll read, like the Mark Greaney books with the gray man, I'm not necessarily learning anything here, but he sure does get out of some hairy situations. I like learning when I'm reading fiction books. Does that come into play when you guys are thinking through this?
I think that we are intellectually curious guys, and that's why we were joking about our Jeff's resume and our diverse experiences and stuff at the beginning of the show, but what that also communicates is the fact that, we're interested in a lot of stuff. We're intellectually curious. So, I have a psychology degree, but then I went into nuclear engineering. I'm curious about how people's brains work and why they do the things they do, and how machines work and how complex structures work. And so we're constantly educating ourselves. We want to stay current on geopolitical events. And, we're immersed in this geopolitical world right now where people are doing some effed up stuff. Mm-hmm. And it has impacts everywhere. So we constantly are saying, man,
what the hell?
So all that stuff migrates into our fiction code. Well, we're learning along with you, Chad. Honestly, what you're learning from the books is stuff that we're learning as we're working through it.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the question that really is buzzing in my brain, because I always say when it comes to comedy, if places like Washington, D.C. are going to keep writing the jokes, it's easy for me to keep telling them. So if you look at the world and the geopolitical environment in which we're living, it's almost like they keep giving you ideas. It's like almost like you're reading the headlines. Do you guys ever look at each other and go, I don't have any idea. I don't know what to do next. I'm dry here. Because sometimes you just creatively, or are you guys able to play off of each other and by working in tandem? Because, by the way, I want to clarify something. You guys, you don't live together. You don't live in the same place. You don't even live in the same city. You just happen to be sitting next to each other today, which adds a whole other dynamic to the fact that you guys aren't just knocking on the door down the hall and saying, what do you think about this?
Yeah. We live 1,000 miles apart, which we're good friends, so it's probably better we get more done if we're not in the same town. But that's a big part of it. I don't think that we ever feel a moment where we're feeling dry. It's more at this point we got a lot of cool ideas. Yeah. We're just trying to find time to get them told. I imagine at some point we might run out of it. But like you said, living in a ridiculous world like we do right now is definitely helpful. And then sometimes you feel guilty. Like I think we talked to you about this before. We wrote that book Collateral in the Tier 1 series with the Ukraine invasion, before the Ukraine invasion. And then when Putin did what he did, it kind of unfolded like exactly how we wrote it. Because in our mind, it's like, well, we knew about Wagner Group, we knew about this, and here's what they did in Crimea. I'll bet they'll do something like this, and then I'll never forget my wife going, "Man, you gotta stop writing that stuff. You think Putin read that? Like, what have you done? Stop doing that." So there's enough ridiculousness in the world that I think we're probably set for the rest of our career to get stuff done.
That's cool, man, because it is going to keep feeding you. I want to get into a couple of those geopolitical questions in a little while, but before we do that, let's talk about this Tom Clancy stuff. So you guys are writing Tom Clancy novels. These are actual Jack Ryan character novels, right?
Yep, that's right. We Mark Cameron was the last guy writing them. Mark Graney, as you know, wrote them after Tom Clancy passed away in 2013. So Graney wrote them, and then Cameron wrote them, and after he hung it up, Tom Colgan from Penguin asked if we would take it on, and we did. And this one that you got is that's our first one. We wrote it last year, but it falls on the 40th anniversary of Hunt for the Red October, which was a huge deal for my submariner writing partner, and for me too. I grew up. Well, I'll never forget the first time I read Hunt for the Red October. Like, man, that's really cool. And then I went into the Navy. So yeah, to be able to write Clancy, who, in my opinion, invented the genre. You mentioned Graney. You've got Josh Hood. You've got Don Bentley, Cameron, Jack Carr, all these guys. We're writing a genre that Clancy invented in 1984 with Hunt for the Red October. It completely reimagined what that military genre was. So to be able to do that, to be asked to write that series and then have it be on the anniversary, that was amazing. So we had a blast writing it. And I think what we did was kind of a love letter to the genre and to Tom Clancy's Hunt for the Red October. There's a lot of little Easter eggs in there for diehard fans that remember the book and were affected by it. But it's a brand new retelling of submarine warfare that's definitely focused on, 2024.
Yeah. I think we've talked about that kind of when you guys were entering into the notion of writing this, because it's been a minute since we've talked on the show. And I think you guys were approaching this project or into it in the writing process of it. And I was like, yes, it would be intimidating to me. Like, it would be daunting to me to think I've got to try to find this legend's voice. We talk about a legend. Tom Clancy's a legend. And we can certainly say that posthumously about anybody that's done what he did. Were you intimidated by this task, or was it just free flowing right into it?
I think that we were intimidated by the possibility of letting down a gazillion fans. Jack Ryan is sort of the ultimate American superhero. You have Superman, but he's not real. And then you have Jack Ryan, he feels very real, right? And you can talk to anybody on the street and they're going to know Hunt for Red October and Jack Ryan. So for us, one of the things that was very, very important is that Tom Colgan originally said, I don't want you to try to ape the master. That never works. Don't try to copy Clancy's voice because you're going to fail. But I want you to be
honor the canon, be faithful to the legacy material, and write the best damn Andrews and Wilson, thriller that you can. I've seen you do in your other series. That's why I'm handing you the reins and trusting you guys to do it. So that was our marching orders, and that gave us a lot of confidence. And so now approaching the problem of, like Jeff said, how do we write this love letter to Tom Clancy? How do we say, you inspired us, and we want to continue to inspire, today's young people to serve? Because part of, I think, what makes Clancy's body of work different from just shoot-'em-up action thrillers is that there's an inspirational component. A lot of people, ourselves included, were inspired to serve because you got access to the first time to these platforms in this Navy that was sort of originally kind of held at arm's length due to OPSEC, which is important. But now you realize, okay, we can celebrate these heroes and these platforms that they serve on without giving away trade secrets and inspire the next generation of men and women who are going to serve.
It's a little bit of a balancing act to do it, but it's almost like you're making the United States Navy one of the characters in the book, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's what Clancy did differently and better than everybody else that came before him. And that's what we wanted to do here. And I guess the audacity helped us, right? So we were like, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it like Clancy did. So we called up the East Coast PAO, the head of the public affairs for the Navy, and said, hey, we're going to write the 40th anniversary Hunt for the Red October sequel book, and y'all need to give us some access so that we can talk to people. And he goes, okay. And but then he chased it up the chain of command. The guy we worked with was amazing.
Yeah.
And they gave us unlimited access. They flew us out to sea. We went out on board the Ford, which is the newest carrier. We went to sea aboard Virginia-class submarines.
Yep.
We flew F-18 simulators with instructor pilots. And that was cool. But what was really cool was the access to the people, because that's what Clancy did. He made those people and their service and their sacrifice come to life. So we sat down with people from E1 through 3-star admirals and said, how can we represent your community in this book in a way that will make you proud? And I think that was the third co-author. The United States was the third co-author in the book. And I think that's why we were able to succeed in doing it. Obviously, the reviews have been really great. We're proud of that. But I think that you talk to the people in the service that have read it, and they're like, yeah, you got it right. That's big. That's big for us.
I think people want not only to have their stories told, they want to have their story told right, Because 13 Hours came out, the movie, and if you know the guys who were there in Benghazi, every one of those guys will say, well, there were a lot of explosions in the movie. We didn't have a lot of explosions on the ground, during that period of time. But that movie maker, he has to have a lot of explosions. I mean, if you've seen Transformers, it was basically the same thing. Yeah. And so, they had an amalgam of certain characters. And so you want the story told right. So I know those guys have got to appreciate the next step that you guys took in telling those stories correctly.
Hope so.
Yeah, that's a powerful legacy on that thing. And I would watch, even though it's fiction, Jack Ryan, as you say, is a legendary character, iconic. And then, whatever it was came out, whatever network came out with the John Krasinski version of the made-for-TV series, which is entertaining, but I still had problems with it. Like I'm watching, I'm like, yeah, they're taking liberties here. This isn't true to the historic character or whatever. But that was my opinion. And so that's why I say I know everybody out there's got an opinion. And they're gonna, they feel like they know these characters. I wasn't too fond of Jack Reacher after Lee Child's son started writing the book. It's just like, it's a little different. And then I know a lot of people who were reading Vince Flynn books, and then all of a sudden, Vince is gone, and now somebody else is writing the books, and they're like, it's not the same. So that's why I say it would have to be a daunting task, but I think you guys are up to it. I mean, y'all.
I'll tell you one thing based on what you just said that we were very intentional about. And I will say, I love Mark Graney and I love Mark Cameron and I love the books that they created. Mm-hmm. But for the 40th anniversary, we wanted to take it back to sort of the original canon of work, but also that method. That's why we engaged the Navy. That's why we did all that. And the story elements that came out as a result are a reflection of that too. So you probably remember when you first read that book or saw the movie, the thing that made it cool, what made that story so cool was that Ryan was not an operator, right? He wasn't the John Krasinski reimagined Jack Ryan kicking in the doors. Jack Ryan, how many times in the first few books and in the movies does he say, but I'm just an analyst. I'm just an analyst. Yeah. That's what made it so cool, right? He was a super smart guy, dog with a bone, that got himself in these fish out of water situations because he couldn't let it go and he knew he was right. Well, the problem is in the series, in the book series, they sort of got away from Jack Ryan as that character because they had no choice. He's now the president. He's been the president for the last, 8 books or 10 books or whatever it is. We can't go back in time, right? So he's the president. So I can't have him fast rope onto it. And so we needed to find a way, because we wanted to honor that feeling. How do we find that almost an analog to Jack Ryan that can do that in our submarine, rogue Russian submarine book? And what we came up with, I think we're pretty proud of. We got Tom Colgan and the estate on board. We said, look, there is this one character in his family, Katie Ryan, who we remember when she was 6 and she was almost kidnapped. We know all that, but no one's written about her since then. And so with all the years that have gone by, where is she now? Well, in our minds, she went to the United States Naval Academy, became a naval intelligence officer, unconsciously almost following in her father's footsteps. And so we were able to invent this or reinvent this character, Katie Ryan, as an adult. And she is sort of our Jack Ryan analog. She's the one that's like, there's something up with this sub. And so that was really, really fun, especially for the first book. It's fun in the second book too. But in the first book, where we're doing our Hunt for the Red October sequel, it allowed us to do a lot of stuff that'll be hugely nostalgic for the original fan base, I think.
What remind me the name of the new one?
Act of Defiance.
Act of Defiance. And it's not out yet, right? It's coming out.
It's coming out tomorrow, actually.
Tomorrow. Okay.
So, yeah.
So on the date of this taping, I got to look. So we're a couple of days before this will premiere. So it came out Tuesday. May 21st. All right.
Exactly.
And I love doing these podcasts the way we're doing them these days, because we used to do same day air, and now we got a little bit of delay. So the beautiful thing is the editors can go in there and make us sound really, really smart. we like that. We've had a few guests that got a little nervous, and I'm like, nope, just go with it. I promise you, you're going to come out like a genius.
I don't know if you can make us sound smart.
Well, you guys are going to
have a good night.
Y'all are going to be all right. All right, geopolitics. Let me ask you a question. So at the time of this taping, yesterday, the, quote, president of Iran, that's actually the Iranian terror regime. The people of Iran don't really like this cat. He and his cabinet members, they had a hard landing in a helicopter that I think was built in 1910 or something like that. Every one of them is dead. They searched for him for, 16 hours, something like that. You think the CIA entered the chat on this thing, or if you guys are prognosticators, was this a good thing overall, or is this very hurtful for the climate of geopolitics that
Here you go.
Well, we were talking, we were like, I wonder if Israel put the gas in that.
Yeah.
Did the Mossad fuel that bird?
Yeah, it's a good, obviously, like everybody, we feel like that seems a little fishy, right? Like it's a little, they have all these guys in one helicopter, and then they're all
in one helicopter.
They hit bad weather. It's like, hit bad weather. Like you're flying the president. You should probably be in some sort of aircraft that can fly in bad weather, I would think. So, I mean, there's a lot of things about the story that sound like, I don't know about that. But in terms of what happens next, I mean, when you talk about a regime like Iran, I mean, it could have been Iran that did him. We don't know. They could have said, yeah, you're not radical enough. Who knows, right? The bottom line, though, from a power structure, it's kind of a hiccup. It'd be more like us losing the Joint Chiefs rather than the president. Like, he's not a president like we think of, right? The Ayatollahs are in charge in Iran. He's sort of more like a defense minister almost. So did he piss somebody off in Iran and they did him? Maybe. Did we do him? Did Israel do it? I don't know. What comes next? I don't know. It can't be much worse, but every time I've said that in the past, it is. It is. So who knows? But yeah, it is.
Agree with your wife. Shut up.
Yeah.
No, I'm watching this thing, and I'm like, they're like, well, they're looking for him. And I'm like, he's dead. He's dead. But they put all of them in the same helicopter and send them off. And honestly, I think it was an older model helicopter.
No, it was. It was like a 40 or 50-year-old. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, it was old. It was old.
Yeah.
I think it was older than me, and I'm 51. So
I think he should have been getting on there going,
what is the meaning of this?
What did I do?
Maybe he didn't get on.
Yeah.
Well, that would do. You
Yeah.
He may have already been in a bag by the
Might have
time.
been cargo. when they
Yeah,
got on
they
board.
could-
Yeah. Well, I hope his 72 virgins look like Rosie O'Donnell. But listen, that's my statement, not Andrews and Wilson. Okay, they have to put up with my political incorrectness. But you're right, Jeff. I think that you never know with a deal like that. Again, it's a hiccup because you cut one tumor out and two more grow back in a situation like that. People in America, they really have no concept of how these things work, and people are going, "Oh, this is great. Maybe this will be a regime change." No, I don't foresee that happening. Not at all.
The regime change there has to come from the bottom, and it would require an enormous amount of external funding and support, and it would take a long time to organize it. People, you look at Iran, I hate Iran. Well, I don't hate Iran because there's a lot of really good people over there. I've
Really
known
good.
some really good people from over there. The insanely small minority is running that country to the ruin of some very good people, for sure. So it's pretty tragic.
Yeah, I've got a young man that works for me. He's a student at Clemson University. He'll be in D.C. this summer working on staff. But he's from Baghdad. His family legally immigrated. His father's a pastor in South Carolina. They legally immigrated here, but I mean, they were in Baghdad, and we tend to think of these folks as being the bad guys, and by and large, they're not. I mean, there's good people in Iran. There's good people in Iraq. There's good people in Afghanistan. As you said, there's the extremists that are there. So it's a whole other deal. Which is, anybody that wants to go back and look at what Iran looked like, 60, 70 years ago, it's a different place than what we're dealing with right now. As we look towards the nature of, we have a president right now who claims to be just an expert on foreign policy. I'm waiting for him to unveil that. I haven't seen that really expressed in a big way on the part of this administration. But when you consider China and you consider Taiwan, I'm surprised, just honest opinion here, I'm surprised China hasn't made a move yet on Taiwan.
I think that a lot of people are surprised, and they've been sort of telegraphing this for a long time. Mm-hmm. And if you talk to people at Naval War College or just folks that are serving, in leadership positions in D.C. and in the fleet, everybody's expecting something to happen because the Chinese have made no secret of the fact that their reunification is on their 50-year plan, and I think that unfortunately, as the world's policemen, we've had a lot on our plate, and so for us to be able to, do every mission with every platform and deal with keeping our own, laundry clean, it's been difficult for us to focus just entirely on China. And so they have spent the past couple decades, building their infrastructure and cybersecurity, counterintelligence. They're building ships at a rate that we haven't built ships since World War II. They have a submarine fleet. They have hypersonic missiles. They have satellites now. So, they're at parity or close to parity with us in many spheres. Mm. And so I think they've just been biding their time to the point where, for us to challenge them on Taiwan would give us pause, right? We'd have to really think about, is this something we think we can stop?
Well, I think that it's an interesting question that you might see reflected in another book.
Future book.
Coming out in December in the Clancy universe, actually. But our next book deals with this thing. And we've spent a lot of time talking to people about it. On the one hand, I completely agree with you. Like if I was China, I'd be like, hey, let's do it. This is the best. It's not going to get better than this. Yeah. You know, we got these, America's so busy fighting with itself. They're going to let us do whatever we want to do, and they're not going to react. They're going to say a lot of stuff and do nothing. But that's not enough. Could they militarily do it? They could militarily do it. But they got to do more than just that. They're going to have to do some sort of false flag operation that justifies it in the world view enough that it doesn't hurt them economically, because the economy is the warfare that we have with China. Yeah, we've become hugely dependent, but if they do something too outrageous to where the average American be like, all right, well, I'll pay a little more for that because that's not okay, then they're going to be screwed. And I think that that's the only thing keeping them in check. We need to be aware of that. We need to remember that in our foreign policy. For one thing, we need to get rid of our Chinese dependence in technology and so many things. And we can talk for hours on that. But we also need to understand what a weapon and tool that can be. So China can't just go into Taiwan, wind up killing tens of thousands of soldiers to take this little island, and think that there's not going to be a reaction in terms of economic sanctions and impact, not just the United States. I think you'd be able to get a coalition of people say, yeah, well, that's not okay. And the impact that would have would not be worth having Taiwan. And so they are going to have to figure that part out. And I worry that's exactly what they're working on right now, figuring that part out. In our imagination, it would be some sort of false flag operation that would justify it. They would have to have something that they could, and it wouldn't even have to be perfect, because because we are so dependent on China, it would just have to be good enough that people can rationalize that it was okay. Maybe in your heart you go, nah, that's bullshit. They shouldn't have done it. But if you can just say, okay, well, I'll keep buying your stuff because I guess that was okay, that's really good enough. And so that's what I worry about, is that they'll figure out some false flag operation that gives them just enough justification.
And if they do that, then they have to say, how long can we wait out the sanctions? I think they're paying very close attention to the Russia-Ukraine situation. And now there's, it's been 2 years, there's global fatigue, and the sanctions on Russia, especially in the oil and gas sphere in Europe, have started to take a toll, and people are getting tired of this. So the Chinese are saying, oh, like what Jeff just said, how long are we willing to pay higher prices for the stuff we buy at, Dollar Tree, or, the components and parts that go in to keep our consumer-driven economy economical, with, buying a new washing machine or a new computer or car, right? So I think that they're watching to see, hey, would a Don't Buy Chinese product campaign launched inside the United States stick? Would it last? Do they have other alternatives? I think some smart things have been happening, and it's the previous administration and this administration both have been pursuing a relationship with India, and there's a lot more strategic manufacturing in Vietnam and Thailand. So you're starting to see a shift away. I think some smart people are planning for, hey, are we going to have a divorce with China? And if we do, are we going to be ready for it? Are we going to have alternate suppliers? And, India, I think, is that next alternative. They
probably should be. That's probably that's in the short term, they have an economy that would do it. Like Vietnam's a good alternative, but ramping Vietnam up to meet the need of the hungry Americans would be a chore. Whereas India
probably can't.
Yeah, it can't happen. But India could do it.
Well, if you look at, because you're right, the currency, the monetary warfare, that's where the fight is fought when it comes to China. In Americans, as you said a minute ago, Jeff, it doesn't have to be a perfect false flag. It doesn't have to be a perfect scenario. I mean, look at all the stuff we've put up with already. I mean, we're perfectly okay with Uyghur slaves building our cell phones, and we're willing to turn a blind eye to so much of the, the atrocities of just what they're doing to human beings in that situation. Yeah, but we get our cheap stuff, right? And our chips come from Taiwan. We don't have really a good option for that. So, yeah, I mean, China takes over Taiwan, and suddenly you don't get to hit that button in your truck anymore to make your seat automatically go back. I mean, Americans are pretty, buddy. Our patience runs pretty thin, pretty quick on stuff, especially when it comes to creature comfort. So, it's a scary scenario when you think about it, because we like for things to happen and be done real fast. And I think that would be a waiting game. So
we got some thoughts on it. Defense Protocol, December.
Yeah. Defense Protocol is the book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you guys have visited with active duty military. You visited with a lot of folks in the research that you've done for the Clancy novel. What's their sense of morale, or is there optimism or pessimism when they look at what's going on around the world, the potential of three fronts, China, Russia, Iran, who knows what else might pop off on the world scale? What's their attitude towards it? Under control? Are they nervous about it? What are they thinking? Did they say?
I mean, I think we've had a few people who've expressed to us that, at least in the Navy, from an aviation and submarine warfare standpoint, there's a certain degree of comfort having technological superiority. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you have two missiles, if we buy two $50 million missiles and that's what you get to go into battle with, and the Chinese are going to shoot 50 cheap missiles at you, at some point you have to pause and say, is that okay? Do I feel well equipped? And I think we've had an asymmetric advantage over our adversaries for so long that this idea of parity is a little bit disconcerting. And so we might have to revisit, and I think there's some very smart people who are having this discussion right now. We might need to revisit some of our decisions about, how we arm our sailors and soldiers, and how we approach potential conflict with an adversary that's close to or on parity with us.
I think that one thing we've learned from what Russia has done in Ukraine is that, and I think this would be mirrored in China, that is that, this issue of technological parity, especially after 20 years of fighting against goat herders in the Hindu Kush, that's a little bit striking to us now. But where we don't have parity, and this is what I can report from being out with the fleet, where we don't have to worry about parity is with our men and women that are serving, because we continue to have some of the best, most dedicated, committed fighting men and women on the planet Earth. Yeah. And they believe in what they're doing and they love their country. I'll be honest, it's been a day since I was out there, and I got kids and new generation. We're all like, this generation. I'm guilty of that too. And I went out to the fleet wondering, hey, is it going to be so, and it wasn't. The 18, 19, 25, 30-year-old people that we met out there on the submarines, on the aircraft carrier, they are hardworking, they're dedicated, they're committed, they're patriotic, they believe in what they do, and they will fight to the death to defend our nation. And that is not something, as you saw in Ukraine, that Russia can boast. Mm-hmm. And I suspect it's not something that China can boast either. We have the best people, and we do still have, especially in the submarine force, we have technological advantages. The submarine force, I believe, will remain the instrumental difference, because you can develop these great airplanes, you can do all that. We still have better technology in our ships and planes, but it's a little closer to parity, I would argue, and the cyber technology definitely closer to parity. But they got those wily submarines out there that you will never see, you will never hear them, and they will rain hell down on you if you push us too far. As long as that's out there, there's never going to be true parity. These guys that we met, they casually and calmly refer to themselves as the apex predators on the planet. And they are. They are the apex predators aboard these Virginia and even still the 688 class submarines. They are the apex predators. They have no competition. You will not see them coming. They will kill you and they will go home safely. So we got that going for us, which is nice.
Do you find that weirdly ironic that, you've got the technology of the skies and even space, But yet we're still kind of doing something that's been around since the Civil War. We still have these boats underwater that are, as you say, the apex predator that makes the difference. I mean, they're the catalyst in this situation. Isn't that weird?
It is when you say it that way, but if you think it through, like 3/4 of the earth is water. So access to your enemy, their access to you, water is always going to be important. That's why Navy is the best branch of service, if I may say. But the other thing is, and this is something we learned thanks to the CNO giving us access, that this sure as hell isn't the technology of the Civil War, but it's not even the technology of when Brian was standing watch aboard his Los Angeles class submarine. The technology, and we can't say much more than this, but the technology, it's so advanced that it's like you're not even talking about the same thing. It's like comparing the Gerald R. Ford to, a wooden ship. That's how different it is. And that's in 20 years.
And even when I was in, one of the most interesting things that we would do is we would do sub-on-sub exercises where we'd go up against our brothers and sisters in the silent service, So you'd play hunter, they'd play, hunted, and you'd try to track, your fellow submarine. And even with our amazing sonar suites, we couldn't find them. They'd have to make noise before we could find them. And so, we always joked, that there's submarines and there's targets. The targets are the ships on the top of the water, and then there's us. And so, I think that platform really does have an advantage and is a security blanket for the U.S. Navy.
And the, if you, not to make this a big PR thing for this book, but being able to talk about that technology in that book was sobering on both sides, because, our antagonist here is a rogue Russian submarine captain who's got his hands on technology that we also can't find. And that's a bit of a problem. And they've got technology that can, or at least if you want to believe their propaganda, they have this Status 6 missile that you see in the book. That's real. Like, we didn't make that up. Like, this is something that Putin has been, we have a Status 6 missile, and you know what it can do? It can cause a nuclear typhoon that sweeps over Florida and makes all of Florida uninhabitable because of the radiation. Is that true? No, not really. But it's not untrue that they have a missile that can travel 60 or 70 knots underwater deep where we can't see or hear it, and can deliver a nuclear weapon into Virginia Beach. That's real. So that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And so we have to always be working hard to make sure that we have asymmetry. We got to be better than they are technologically. We have to have a better intelligence service. We have to know what's going on. We have to have better cyber. Because if we don't, the ways that man has discovered to kill each other are getting a little out of hand. And we better be the apex predator, or we're screwed.
Yeah, I want to come back to what you just said there in a minute, because I've got another question for you, but we'll get a little philosophical in a minute. But, when Clancy came out with Hunt for Red October, I mean, the Cold War was very much a real thing at that point in time, this idea of mutually assured destruction through, nuclear war. And then we kind of breathed the sigh of relief at the fall of, communism. And I can remember being in Moscow in 1994. You could still feel the residue, the darkness, the heaviness of it there, even though these people were kind of learning a whole new way of life. It was still very much there. And now we're kind of back to this idea of World War III / nuclear war. I think in many ways we've sort of been in World War III already on a number of things. The way of fighting each other and hurting one another is taking on a different face. What are y'all's thoughts on the prospect of that versus what we're experiencing right now? I mean, do you think we're kind of in these first vestiges of encroaching one another on a World War basis, or no? Is that all just fear and hype?
I mean, I think that you're onto something in the sense that, hybrid warfare is here to stay. During the Cold War, I think that we had this, there was the specter of nuclear war, but the cloak and dagger stuff was it lived in the world of intelligence and spies and espionage, right? And now what we've seen is okay, this intrusion of cyber warfare, propaganda, destabilization of, our elements of our economy and our politics and our business outside of just the defense industrial complex. So that should give us pause, number one. Number two, I think we should take pause and consider that, Putin has erected 190 statues in the past year of Stalin around the country. Why is he doing that? He's doing that to tighten his grip and go back to this idea that, let's be nostalgic about when we were the USSR, when America was the villain and we are a superpower. So, you're starting to see this pivot back towards this idea that, okay, they're the enemy. We have to circle our wagons and really, militarize again. And we're starting to see that. And we're seeing that with their propaganda as well. The fact that they're even willing to talk about nuclear tsunami wiping out Florida. We're going to send backfire bombers and we're going to nuke Great Britain. And they put a promotional video out. I mean, the fact that you're seeing these things is definitely a signal that we're turning back from that period of, hey, maybe there's light at the end of this tunnel.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with everything Brian said, and I think that the scary part of that for me is, where do we not dominate, right? I think we learned, like I said earlier, we learned in Ukraine that we dominate in our personnel, we dominate in our equipment. Like, if anything, Ukraine made us go, okay, well, we don't want to lose Ukraine, but we're not afraid of these people. Like, we could take them, right? Okay, I watched that guy fight that guy. I can take him. There's a little bit of that. But the problem is, where we don't dominate, in my opinion, is in information warfare. Not just the cyber aspects of it and hacking and all that stuff. China's got a pretty sophisticated thing. But I'm talking about actual information warfare. I'm not saying we're not doing it. We know that we are. We've met and spoken with some people who are really talented in that space. But we are behind that curve, in my opinion, and it's somewhere where we need to make up. If we want to avoid our forces coming nose to nose and risking that kind of conflagration, we need to get stronger in the information warfare space, I think.
And we're kind of handicapped just by the nature of our
morality.
Yes. So morality. My daughter said to me, Dad, in your books, she said this last night. Dad, in your books, the good guys win, but in real life, do the bad guys win? Do they get to, do the good guy always win? I said, unfortunately, in real life, a lot of the bad guys stick around because they're willing to do stuff that the good guys are not willing to do, right? And so we're handcuffed by our morality. We're also handcuffed by the fact that we have a capitalist economy, a democracy with a capitalist-driven economy where, we cannot do what the Chinese and Russians do. We cannot lock down every business, every media station, everybody's phones and track them where they go, nor should we, right? We don't want to live in that kind of world. But unfortunately, the reason that they do those things are because it's effective. It's a way for them to squash dissension and prevent, our truth, the reality of the global politic from infiltrating their little bubble of what they want.
And it also allows them, both the economic and the information side, sort of intersected in this space, which is they can control the narrative in ways that we can't. And again, I agree, nor should we. We need to be better than there. We have our moral compass. But by controlling the information available to their people and also completely dominating and controlling the economy and where money is spent, they can look at the newest Arleigh Burke destroyer and that we can only make a couple dozen of these things because we also have schools to run and roads to repair and people want to be able to do things. And in China, they go, those Americans are going to kill all of us, so we're going to close down these schools in this city so that we can build 400 of our own Arleigh Burke. You look at their new destroyers, like, that looks really familiar. Or you look at their jets, like, that looks really, really familiar. Only they're mass producing them at the expense of their people, and none of their people are going to complain because A, that's dangerous, and B, they are being fed this, the party's narrative. And so they're like, oh yeah, we have to do that or they're going to come and kill us all, those evil Americans. So it's a problem. Like, we're defining a problem with no solution. I know, I'm aware of that, Chad, but we have to find a way to dominate that space while simultaneously being true to our values, true to capitalism, true to all of the things that we value as a nation, but still have an effective way to win the information war and win the technology war that allows us to have the asymmetric advantage that prevents that war from occurring.
That's some powerful insight. Everything you guys just said. Like, I mean, what was it, a year and a half ago? Xi Jinping is sitting there in front of all of these people, and President Wu, the former president, they come and escort him out of the room, and nobody even turns their head to look at this guy being led out to whatever banishment they were taking him to. It's like, that's a different world that we live in. I did a panel discussion a couple of years ago. I don't know why they have a redneck with a cowboy hat on a panel discussion about Chinese geopolitics, but there I was with some other, Chinese immigrants who are very outspoken people in America today, and they're just really, really intelligent people. Jack Posobiec, he pretended to be a Chinese general, and he was arguing from the point of how great China runs itself. Why wouldn't you want to do things the way China does them? And he was making all these really, really good points about how effective they are by doing the things the way they do them in China. And at the end of the thing, sort of as a joke, I said, okay, we got 1,000 people sitting out of here after listening to these compelling arguments. How many of you want to live in China?
Right.
Everybody said there wasn't a single hand that went up. So, yeah, they are effective in so many different things they do. But, man, the price of freedom, right? I mean, the fact that we don't want to compromise a certain way of life and a certain value system, and I think a lot of us are frustrated because we feel like those values are being compromised for us by bureaucrats and, politicians and so on and so forth. What's new? I want to ask you guys.
Nothing like leaving this on a high note.
No kidding. I mean, I'm glad those
We're
guys
not even
out
going
there.
to the book signing now.
I'm glad though. Yeah. See you, Jeff. I'm glad the Submariners are optimistic because damn.
Well, they're just oxygen
deprived. Yeah, they're a strange bunch. Yeah.
Well, anybody that gets on a tube with a bunch of dudes and goes down underwater and lives is a weird dude. It makes my claustrophobia act right up. I had Kurt Newcomb on the show the other day, and he spent 50 years in deep sea salvage, Titanic, USS Indianapolis, the Gemini 3, Gus Grissom's Liberty Bell 7 capsule that went down, the Challenger, all these things. And I'm just listening to these stories, and I'm growing more and more claustrophobic as I'm listening to him talk about these, TWA 800, all of these things. So I don't know. Brian, you guys are weird, dude. You're just weird. And I'll just leave it at that. And of course, my favorite Navy joke, and I've done it with every Navy SEAL I know, is, that's the thing about being in the Navy and a submariner, 120 dudes go down and 60 couples come up, right? So that's, typical Navy joke. I love it.
Doesn't work anymore because we're a combined force now.
I was going to say,
everything's all together. Everything's all together, and it's all woke. But that's a whole other topic. But philosophically speaking, what is the fascination with war and killing each other? I mean, it's obviously it's our entertainment, but yet we can't stop talking about it either, and we're seeing it played out in the real world. What are y'all's thoughts?
I mean, me personally, I think it's a fascination because there's a little kid inside of us that wants to know that guy is out there keeping them safe. And I think the more uncertain the world seems, the more our fascination, the more you're going to see, look at the last 15, 20 years, action movies and this and that, and more spies and Mission Impossible, and Clancy's coming back, and Jack Ryan on the TV show. Why? Because we want to know those guys are out there. We at least want to fantasize that there are, people standing in that gap between us and destruction. There's a part of us, every kid grew up wanting to be that guy too. But even that's partly, I think, from a psychology standpoint, driven by a need to know somebody's doing it, because otherwise we're just all victims, right? And you and I've had that conversation about sheep and sheepdogs and wolves, and you don't need everybody to be a sheepdog, but every sheep wants to know there's a sheepdog, and maybe even fantasizes that they could be one if they had to be. So I really think that the fascination is driven by that. It's a desire for security. It's a desire to know that we can sleep, to ruin the paraphrase, we can sleep peacefully in our beds because, rough men are out there willing to do violence on our behalf. We need that fantasy to be real, and so we're obsessed with it. That's my take.
Brian?
I love the question because I think about it a lot. Because I feel like on one hand, I'm participating in the glorification of warfare, right? Helping to transform our public conscious into this warrior ethos. Like, am I perpetuating this idea of violence and that, our nation needs to be a nation of warriors? I think about that. And you talk to people, I was having a conversation the other day with someone who lived in Costa Rica, and they said, well, we made the decision that, we're going to not have a standing army. We're going to put all of our resources into ecotourism and education and health services for our people. And Costa Rica is one of the happiest, most wonderful places on the planet. And at first you think, well, we should all do that. And we should all do that. But unfortunately, there's some really nasty people who, if the rest of the world did that, there wouldn't be any Costa Ricas. So, part of me says, the Costa Ricas and the Swedens and the places that get to don't have to have an expenditure on their military and have a warrior caste because they've decided to opt out. They're relying on us to protect and fund the global stability. It is taking a toll on our nation, right? Because we've had to supplement that. And the fact is, bullies just don't go away because you ask them to. Otherwise, they wouldn't be bullies. And so I just don't think collectively the human species is capable of living a perpetually peaceful life. We haven't done it for as long as there's been documented history. So the reality is we need a warrior caste. And would it be nice to have fewer of us and maintain stability in the world at a cheaper, less intrusive way? Yes, that would be really nice. We haven't solved that problem yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with utopian society theory in general, right? It only works if, you said if all of us did it. Well, it would work if all of us did it, but all of us won't do it.
Yeah.
And so it's like communism. We've had this philosophical conversation. Is there really fundamentally anything wrong with the idea of communism? No. Like the communism, but it doesn't work. Why? Because there's people involved, right? The tenet of communism of each according to their need and, that's beautiful. Like that's biblical. But it's administered by evil people who use it as a big lie to oppress people. So, I think the idea that we could ever give up on this, go to a utopian society is ruined by the fact that there's people involved. And so as long as there's other humans, there's going to have to be a warrior class that can keep us safe and keep our children safe. And, thank God there are. And so I feel no guilt whatsoever writing about what I write because we've been part of it, but also it's necessary. Sad, but true. My faith. This is not the world that I wish we lived in, but we live in a fallen world. And until it comes to an end and God makes it all right, we're in the fallen world and we got to live in the suck that we're in. And that means I got to keep my kids safe. And if I can help keep other people's kids safe because they're sheep and not sheepdogs, I'm okay with that.
That's valid points. Great points. And you're right. It is. You said something that it might have caught in somebody's mind. It is biblical. The book of Acts talks about the people in the early church. They shared things in common. They were, but that wasn't communism. They had a common goal. They had a common fellowship. They had something greater than them that was driving them, that was of value. Because that's the problem. You end up with a Maduro or a Pol Pot or a Lenin and Stalin. You end up with a Mao Zedong. You end up with a Xi Jinping. You end up with a, and the list goes on because it's one thing to have socialism if you have a benevolent dictator. But the dictators are never benevolent.
They don't exist. Well, that's an interesting point, that the idea of the Acts 2 church. Like, I love that because, in Acts, the church wasn't a place. Like, they talk about going to temple, but when they say church, they're not talking about that building. They're talking about this community that they're living in. Why did it work? It did work, but why? Because no human was in charge of it, right? There, Peter and Paul wasn't there yet, but Peter was there and John was there and all these guys were there. And they had some guys that were like administrators, but none of them was in charge. They got on their knees and they prayed to the guy in charge who was God, and he made sure that there was fairness and equity. And even then, they still had problems. If you read the rest of Acts, right? They still got pissed at each other and, well, I'm not going over. You go to Samaria without me, then, you jerk. And even then, it wasn't perfect. So
yeah, I mean, you had
good point.
You had the Apostle Paul who says, I hotly confronted Peter to his face.
Right.
Because again, they were promoting a hierarchy of saying the Jews were better than the Gentiles, even in this new thing called Christianity.
Even this. My favorite is John always saying, and then Jesus turned to his favorite, and you're like, he's talking about himself.
Well,
Or Peter must be like, dude, you got to stop doing that. Like, that's not okay.
I mean, they're literally sitting there having a conversation amongst each other saying, who's going to sit at his right hand when he comes into his kingdom? Who's good? So,
you guys are morons. You're not listening.
Man's inhumanity to man, all based off of vanity, narcissism, ego, and pride. I'll tell you, when we worship at the altar of that unholy trinity of me, myself, and I, right. Sit on the can all, or what is it? Get all you can all you get, and sit on the lid, poison all the rest. So I trust, us four and no more, me and mine, John and his, and we don't trust John. So it's kind of crazy, the world we're living in. And again, you can go back to the Garden of Eden. You can go back to the, Cain and Abel. It's there. So Andrews and Wilson, you guys have the new clan. Hold it up there again. Hold that sucker up there again. I'm a bad.
Please tell me they sent you one. I hope you got one.
You know what? I've been out of town. I just got back, and I have not been to my little community mailbox down there. But if
it's not there, shoot me a text. We'll get you.
I will, because I want to get it from you. They did reach out about it, but I just got back into town, and I haven't been down there today. So we're running around like a chicken with his head cut off. But man, I love and appreciate you guys as brothers. I appreciate your contribution not only to society. I'm thankful for your service and just the input that you have, not just writing, but as friends, and just the insight you guys have. So thank you for doing what you're doing, and just keep up the good work. Try not to kill each other.
Appreciate it, man. We always enjoy talking to each other.
Yeah.
I like to talk to you for a long period of time, because then I'm like, oh, that's right, he's a smart guy.
So you and I met when we actually met in person. We were at Larry Alex Taunton's.
Yeah, that's right. At his house.
I call it his lake house, but it's his house. He lives on the lake there in Alabama, and I was there just this past week for a couple of days, and we've got some content coming out between us, and so we spoke of you in good terms. We fondly reflected upon your presence when you were there, Jeff, and we got to get Brian out there as well. There's very few places on the planet where I can just detach and relax like I can at Larry's house. There's just a peace over that place. It's a beautiful place. But Larry does that all the time with me. He's like, I see you in the cowboy hat, and I kind of forget that you're educated.
Well, I feel like we shouldn't even sign off on you being able to air this, because there's no cowboy hat. Like, you came on, you had that hair. It's like, he's going to trade it in a minute. Like, I feel like you're off brand. It's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable.
I did an episode the other day with Megan Basham, and I didn't wear a hat at all, so it was really freaky.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I'd had to just sign off.
It was really freaky. So anyway, hey, you guys stay safe out there in all your travels and all your doings, and I can't wait to read the book, man. I'm so excited about it. God bless you guys. Thanks for coming on the show. Andrews and Wilson get everything they've ever written, 28, 29, 30 books. They're debating. They don't know, but it's a lot. It's a lot. So Brian Andrews, Jeff Wilson, my good friends, thank you guys, and God bless you guys. Hey, for those of you who want to find me out on the road, watchchad.com is where all the fun stuff is. And I will tell you this. Hang on a second. I want to make sure that I get this right before these guys sign off. You can go to andrews-wilson.com. That's the right one, right, boys? And it's got the little dash in there. Andrews-wilson.com. It's got all the stuff, and you'll see them with all these different folks in here as well with their pictures. But you can get everything you need right there, andrews-wilson.com. Hey, guys, I love you. God bless you. We will see you next time. Until then.